Video editing is arguably one of the most important parts of creating videos, so you don't want to get it wrong. In this video, I'll be sharing how I edit my videos and also give you some helpful tips along the way. I'll be using Final Cut Pro in this tutorial, but these tips will apply to all video editing softwares. The first thing I do after I import all of my media into my project is start cutting down my A-roll. A-roll is very important because it's going to be seen throughout the majority of the video. The first thing I make sure I do is color correct and grade my footage. I do this before I make a single cut so that I won't have to go and copy and paste these settings to all the clips later on. Since I shoot all of my footage in S-Log2, I've created my own preset to make this process even easier. And this preset consists of a conversion LUT, so I can convert my footage to Rec. 709, as well as a LUT that I use for my look or grade. I can also correct any exposure or white balance mistakes here as well. I highly recommend that you create your own preset for color grading your videos. It makes the process so much easier because all you have to do is drag that preset onto your footage, make a couple corrections, and you are good to go. Creating your own preset in Final Cut is really easy. All you have to do is hit the Save Preset button after you've created your look, and then you'll find it in the Effects tab where you can drag it onto any one of your clips. After I apply my preset, I start going through the footage and cutting it down. I make jump cuts between takes or long pauses, and I use different techniques to make these jump cuts smoother. One of the techniques I like to use is just zooming in between the cuts. All you have to do is make your jump cut, and on the second clip, zoom in a little bit. You also want to make sure to keep the eye level the same as the previous unzoomed clip, because this will make the effects so much smoother and easier to look at. This technique will help your viewers engage better with your videos and just make them look more interesting on top of hiding those harsh cuts. Another thing that I really like to do to hide harsh cuts are J and L cuts. Basically, these cuts are when the audio of one clip plays either before or after another clip starts. The name is also based off of what the cut will look like in the timeline. If it's a J cut, it'll look like a J. If it's an L cut, it'll look like an L. To do this in Final Cut, all you have to do is expand the audio on both of your clips and then just drag one of the clips to the left or the right. You'll see the audio start to overlap, and that's how you know you've done the cut right. Okay, so now that we've got our A-roll cut down, it's time to start adding music. Music may seem really simple at first, but trust me, it will take you forever to find perfect music for your videos. I recommend that you find and download a ton of music that you like before you actually start editing. So then when you are editing, it's all right there and you can drag whatever song you want into the timeline. After your music is in the timeline, you have one really important thing to do. Turn it down. You don't want the music to be so loud that you can't hear yourself talking, but you also don't want it to be so quiet that you can't hear it at all. Mess around with it until you find a good audio level that works for you. If part of your track is quieter than the rest, you can easily turn up that specific part without messing up the rest of it. In Final Cut, just hit R on your keyboard and select the part of your track that you want to turn up. You should see it highlighted in yellow. Then just turn it up and you should see that that part is now louder while the rest of the song is unchanged. You'll also see keyframes at the beginning and end of your selection. You can adjust these keyframes to make the transition as smooth as possible. Okay, so now that we've got all the boring A-roll cut down and we've added some music, it's time to start adding the fun parts to our videos. I like including B-roll, sound effects, text, and graphics in my videos, but I make sure not to add too many. You don't want to overwhelm your viewers with all the different sound effects and text and transitions and zoom-ins, but you also don't want to bore them by only including your talking head A-roll footage. If a viewer is overwhelmed or bored, they'll simply find a better video to watch. So you want to use a good mix of these techniques, but not overdo it. Let's take a look at my timeline for the 5 iPhone camera tips video that I did. You can see that I have my talking head A-roll footage, but I also have different sound effects, images, and text on top of that. I also include some B-roll that related to what I was talking about, and these clips are from much earlier this year. So you don't always need to go out and shoot B-roll specifically for your video. If you have some old clips lying around that relate to the topic you're talking about, you can use those. Another thing that I like to do is add text when I change from one topic to the next. I usually like to use a nice bold font with a blurred drop shadow. Sometimes I will animate my text in and out by using a slide transition, adding a popping up effect, or using a gradient background. If I want to use the slide transition, I will go to the Transitions tab in Final Cut, and I'll drag the slide transition onto my text. If I click on the transition, I can mess around with the duration, direction, and type of transition. I can add a whoosh sound effect when the text animates in and out to take this effect even further. The popping up effect requires a little bit more effort, but it's not hard at all. I'll go to the beginning of my text and set a keyframe. I'll scale down my text so that's really small. Then I'll go forward 3 frames and set another keyframe, and I'll scale the text up to be 115 or 120. This way the text is bigger here than I want it to be at the end. Then I'll go forward 2 more frames and I'll scale the text back down to 100%. Play it back and you should get this really cool popping effect. Now, sometimes Final Cut Pro does this weird thing when you're scaling up or down the text, so you may need to adjust the position keyframes as well. And finally, if I want to use the gradient background effect, I will go to the Generators tab and find Gradient. I'll mess around with the colors until I find a combination that I like. Then I'll usually make the generator slide in, but I don't use the slide transition that Final Cut Pro gives you. I'll manually keyframe it and then adjust the clip speed so I can smooth out these keyframes. Because sadly right now, Final Cut Pro gives you no way to actually smooth out your keyframes. And that's it. Now you're ready to export. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe down below for more videos just like this, and watch this video next if you want to learn which video editing software you should choose.